If you are really good at analysis, there's a real good chance that you might be terrible at execution. No, I'm not trying to sell a stereotype or tell you something that's a myth. It's a fairly common cognitive pattern that is seen among more introverted and abstract types. Now, is analysis and execution related? That's a very interesting question. To be honest, if you look at it, it's like a seesaw. The more time that you spend for analysis, you're actually taking away time from execution. So it does make sense in some way that the more you analyze, you take away the resources that are necessary for execution. You take away time, you take away your brain power to do the stuff instead of just thinking about it and analyzing it to death. It makes sense when you look at it like that. Now, why is that? It's quite interesting, to be honest. There are multiple reasons driving this, but if you look at it closely, if you look at it at the abstract structure, there are certain key variables that's actually driving this. So, one of the core reasons is that for sensing types, or for a lot of people in general, they get their dopamine when they get things done. But for analytical types, for people who dive deep into analysis, they tend to get their dopamine from the act of thinking itself. When they spend a lot of time on one particular topic, reading about it or thinking about it, their brain gives them a lot of dopamine for that. So, in a way, it feels like you have achieved something when in reality you have not. In your mind, in your head, the blueprint is already there. Imagine you know it clearly in your mind, but then you're pretty bad at doing it and showing it to other people. So most people think you know nothing. Imagine what they would be thinking about you. I mean, I'm pretty sure most of these people who are in their own minds might be caring less about how other people think about them. But even then, imagine what's in you, and but you're not able to deliver it. It's quite contradictory and ironic and sad. This usually happens when you break down a system or see a pattern or dissect an idea and understand it a bit more. These are the times when your brain feels like it has accomplished something. But in the real world, it's unverifiable. So, in a way, for other people, this is no achievement. But for you, mentally, you feel like you've accomplished something. Imagine you've been doing this since a very long time, from your childhood or even your teenage life. So, the brain quietly learns this pattern that thinking about this particular thing and discovering something mentally is as good as doing the thing. When you come to trading, this is why many analytical minded people try perfecting an idea for like 6 hours and never execute a trade, or never buy an account or spend some real money to see how the market responds to their strategy. Now, if we come to the second reason, I'm not sure how many people are going to agree to this. It exposes a bit of our own personality, so I'm not sure if we'll be ready to accept this actually. Thinking or analysis does not involve risk. It's risk free. But execution invites judgment. Everybody gets to see it. So people will judge. People will look at the outcome that you've produced. They will have opinions, and it's not going to be polite. Many people actually think that is not the primary reason that they do not want to execute. But I think subconsciously, somewhere in our mind, this is one of the core mechanisms that is actually stopping us to execute. Why? Because why do you think you spend a lot of time analyzing stuff? Because you want to make sure that you're not going to commit a mistake. So there you go. That is why I'm trying to tell you that you are trying to avoid judgment, because mistakes scare you. They frighten you. You don't want to seen as somebody who does mistakes. So you're trying to avoid all your mistakes and execute perfectly with 100% perfection, debugging everything. That is why we spend a lot of time in analysis in the first place. We don't feel like it. We don't feel like we are scared of that particular judgment. But maybe it's judgment from yourself. You don't want to be seen as imperfect. Maybe it's not from somebody else necessarily, but from yourself. You don't want to look at your own production or executed idea and feel like, okay, that was a mistake. There are some mistakes there. That's not something that you want to tell yourself. You might have already heard of this, that perfection does not exist. Everything, anything literally can be improved. But even then, even though we understand this idea, we don't want to be terrible, right? We don't want to look really bad. Irony is that for most things in life, just based on analysis alone, you will never get to know if an idea is true, or if it's working, or if it's truly great. Why? Because most of the things in real world needs execution. They improve through iteration. Analysis is key. Of course, I agree to that. But after a point, you have to execute to see how the real world responds to that particular idea. And then you have to do multiple iterations to improve or refine that particular idea. So, what actually improves it? Analysis plus execution and iteration improves it. Philosophically speaking, potential is the most comfortable space to live, and it's the most useless, to be honest. The third pointer is that you might have winged a lot of things in life. So you feel like, I don't need to prepare to do this. So you assume that the practice of execution is not that important. Analyze to death and then execute for once and then it's fixed. That is what your thinking is. But to be honest, that's not how real world works. Analysis and execution are completely different skill sets. Some people tend to believe that if you understand something very deeply, execution will follow automatically. But that's not true. When you test it in the real world, you will see how the real world variables respond to it. There are multiple factors that we will not be able to account for when we are actually doing the analysis, because reality is messy, right? This is why so many analytical people understand trading really well. They know exactly what to do, they know how the market moves. Sometimes it makes me wonder, like an SC type, a sensing driven type, can execute perfectly in the market. They can do quick scalps within minutes without understanding the market in depth, because they have gotten used to the momentum and the movement and just the execution practice of the market. They are actually generating money from the market without understanding it to an insane amount of depth, because that's not actually required for you to make money. So what I'm trying to say is, it's a perfect balance of understanding plus execution skill that's actually going to determine your profits. If you understand it well, pair it with solid consistent execution, and that is what is going to drive us to profitability in the market. But a lot of people, a lot of analytical types are actually really good on the analysis part and understanding the markets part, but terrible at execution. Let's say knowledge doesn't automatically translate to behavior. If you are an analytical type and if you're maybe not that good at execution, this could actually work for you. Force yourself to execute with a bit of mediocrity. That might actually help. Execution involves boredom tolerance. You might have to repeat a thing without introducing novelty to it, without any change, without refining it continuously in an iterative manner. This might actually not provide enough dopamine to, an analytical type or somebody who's living in abstraction every day. One method that I have found myself works pretty good here is actually to build systems for you so that you don't have to think about it or decide in the moment. I know it's quite difficult. It's not easy as some of the self-help motivational speakers say. What might click for certain people is to just execute one small idea and see how it works. That might provide a bit of motivation for another one. It's going to be nothing like fast. It's going to be slow, but I think systems could actually help us with this particular issue of it being just boring. Also, there is this identity trap. You are that person who thinks really well, so you cannot afford to make mistakes. Some people are too hard on themselves that way. Usually, I think pretty clearly, so I cannot expose myself as somebody who makes mistakes. So, that is also one limiting factor. Sometimes you have to break your identity to reinvent yourself and break out of that particular comfort zone. Now, the interesting paradox is that actually execution does not weaken analysis. In fact, execution helps your analysis. Analysis alone gives you feedback, true. You understand it very deeply. But if you pair it with execution, the feedback loop is infinitely faster. You analyze, you execute, you see real world data, you get the feedback immediately, then you analyze again, you improve. If you turn it into a loop, I think even in trading or any other part of life, you're going to improve tremendously. You become a bit more grounded. Reality starts teaching you everything. The world is full of people like you and me who analyze things endlessly, who want to understand things deeply and even understand a lot of things, but do nothing about it. You can be just that way. Nobody is forcing you to execute. But if somebody inherently feels that they need to build something real out of that understanding that they have and not let it go to waste or just exist in their mind until the moment they die. If you want to just put it out there for other people or help humanity in general, I think learning execution is a brilliant idea, and it's not going to be that difficult. You've spent a lot of time understanding about other things. Just spend a bit more time understanding what actually helps you to execute.